All right. Hello, team. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Doing good. Doing
All
decent.
right. So let's talk about a buzz phrase that, if that's a term in and of itself, but something that we've all seen with more frequency on LinkedIn and elsewhere, and it's this notion of an ideal candidate profile.
Hmm.
We ourselves, preach the importance of building one. Other recruiting firms and companies talk about the need to have an ideal candidate profile before a company starts to hire. I thought it would be good for us to take a few minutes to talk about what we think that term means, how to build one, and what it doesn't mean. So I'll go first, Matt, and then I'm curious to hear your perspective and Krissy's. I mean, to me, an ideal candidate profile, put simply, is a documented framework for running a search for talent to meet role and company requirements that have already been spelled out. That basically documents, you know, the demographics of where a search needs to be run. If there's a requirement to be in an office or to hire for proximity to a certain region. So, an ideal candidate profile should say where someone needs to be, the compensation range, available and required to meet. But also, it should spell out in some detail what are the key competencies that are required for successful execution in that role for that company, with the values and behaviors that are expected to work well as a team. I'm curious, is it as simple as that, Matt? I mean, how would you define this? And maybe if you can talk a little bit about what you've seen that should be avoided when building an ideal candidate profile.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think organizations that do this well and are transparent, they then pivot their ideal candidate profile, which is frequently an internal document or an internal set of requirements that are then shared with internal TA teams or external teams like ourselves. I think organizations that are transparent have figured this out. They translate that ideal candidate profile to the job description, so the candidates know exactly what skills, experiences, behaviors, locations, any requirements that go into this or nice to haves. Um, they can see that on the front end. I know we always try to share ideal candidate profile, which is one of the ways we separate from other
Right.
messaging out there. Um, I think what's interesting about ideal candidate profiles is that they continue to change with the org, assuming the org is either getting larger or maybe they're making it to the next round or they're pivoting into either new products or new regions, new markets, things of that nature. You'll see that their ideal candidate profile can shift. A lot of the clients that we work with, because they're C to Series B, just as an aggregate for the most part, you'll see most of our clients are looking for individuals that have that same series or organizational like it not level, but they're looking for somebody who has that type of experience that's worked for a Series A before, that's
Right.
joined as the second AE or the third CSM or the first
Right.
SDR, and then scaled and grown with that team. So a lot of times you'll see ideal candidate profiles will start as one thing, and then over time you'll see a shift where some of the requirements get peeled back. Maybe they don't have to have SaaS experience now because we can take a chance on our eighth AE. Maybe they don't need to live in Dallas anymore because we're going to go fully distributed, so they can live anywhere. So the ideal candidate profile is a lot of times frequently shifting, and sometimes it shifts in real time mid search, which can be a hassle. I know that's not to address directly what it is, Chuck, but I think you summarized what it is, and so I'm just trying to provide some context of how
Right.
it should not be a static document, one, and it should be shared almost completely transparently through the job description so that candidates know exactly if they align with the skills, behaviors,
Right.
experiences, and everything else.
Right. Maybe taking what you said, and Chris, you directed this at you, and I totally agree. When done well, there's really nothing I can think of that goes in an ideal candidate profile that should not be exposed in the job description, as you
Right.
said. This should be there's no reason a company that's hiring at a high level of excellence should be unwilling to disclose every aspect of what competencies are required for success. But I also think it is a different deliverable document in a way, because an ideal candidate profile really is, targeting the recruiting and sourcing teams that are responsible for finding candidates that meet the spec. But I mean, are there things, Krissy? I mean, is there anything that maybe does go into an ideal candidate profile that you don't necessarily want to expose to talent? Is there more to this that we're missing
Well,
here, or are there things that you've seen that companies are putting in here that ought to be avoided altogether?
I can tell you what it's not to start off. So it's not saying whether you want to hire a woman or someone with
Right,
a diverse background. A lot of people think that's where they're getting strategic with
right,
what they're trying to go after. And pretty sure that wouldn't be okay to put on a job description. We're looking to hire a woman only, right? Just for discrimination laws and whatnot. So it's not that. It's not copying someone else's job description and then using that to tailor what you want, right? I think a lot of times, kind of going to your point, Laura, is what you were saying, and then earlier, Chuck, people take drafts of other things, which is why we stay in this circle of being unable to break this, long-standing issue with having the same people, get the same seats at the table, and also why we make hiring so much more difficult than it needs to be. And it's because we're not changing how we open that funnel, and that's opening that funnel does not mean more like, the more I'm trying to think of the best word to use this because it's human beings, but more unqualified people coming in, but more folks that actually have the ability to be successful. And that starts with an ideal candidate profile. And it's going, what does this person need to do well, right? And a lot of times, this is a hard thing to do because you might realize I don't have any data to back this up. And that's an
hmm
important thing and realization to come to because then you go, okay, if I don't have any data to back this up, there's a chance I could be wrong. Now, sometimes we don't have the data, right? And that's okay. But then we need to know that if we're going to try this, there's a chance that it could fail and we need to readjust. And we know why we failed and what we need to do to get better versus I just want to make, like, when people don't know, they divert to the norm, which is I'm going to copy what my competitors are doing or what other
right,
people are doing. And that in and of itself doesn't actually always align with your company, right? Or this whole
right.
note. So those are things that I think it's not. And I think people actually mistake of thinking that they're getting very specific and how they're going about their plan. But I suppose, I've seen things where you could put like, what are these people going to care about when you're writing that ideal candidate profile? Like, and I think it's important to kind of
Right.
understand that. So you may not be putting that in the job description, like, hey, this person, could potentially be, based on the skills and behaviors, which would kind of assume they've had a certain amount of experience, they're probably going to be folks that, have a family or of that age or range. And so we want to make sure that we cater to folks that could be in that space as well as not. And they're going to care about work-life balance, right? Or something like that.
Right.
So those are things that you could put in there that I think are valuable to make sure you know your audience of who you're trying to captivate, but you may not necessarily put in the job description.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good distinction. These can provide opportunities to maybe elaborate more on potential constituents that might find this opportunity more compelling, potential work backgrounds that might be interesting. But as I think we've discussed, it's important this is done in a way that doesn't become arbitrary or
Yeah.
working either without data, or I think another issue is working with data that's too limited. I mean, how often do we talk to companies that maybe have had one or two hires not work out and then over-index in the other direction,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
When what they're missing is often these hires didn't work out, not because they hired from industry background or non-industry background or right out of college or whatnot, but because they hadn't really built a process to assess for key competencies, or they didn't know what competencies they needed, and hired for the wrong
Yeah.
attributes, right? So
Sure.
all good stuff. I think we've yeah. So I mean, I think we're in consensus that, I mean, you need to build an ideal candidate profile. It's really the audience for this it's an internal team. It's your search team, your hiring team. It's really defining thoughtfully, not like in an overly arbitrary way, but with some level of detail, the skills, behaviors, the competencies that you believe are needed for success, the types of candidates that you think might be responsive to that, the body of work that
Mhm.
you want to see as reflecting those competencies in action. And then similarly, having, detail on regional requirements, work style requirements, office requirements, et cetera, so that that's also part of, how you're going out and finding candidates for the opportunity, right?
Sure. And
Are we?
what we'll also have one more thing to add here. It is, especially if it's your first time doing it, it will be a little time consuming in the sense of, getting that stuff on paper, really thinking through it can take some time. And many people, I think, argue, I don't have time to do that. I've got to go fast. I've got to get results. And I just want to remind our viewers, anyone listening, what you don't have time for is to hire the wrong person. What you don't have time for, and realize that 6 months down the road, what you don't have time for is to start that interview process and then try to be adjusting and calibrating in the middle. And now you've created bad candidate experience, and you're taking an extra 2 months or month to hire that person, when if you had just spent the 3 hours that you didn't have time for, let's call it a day max, which is not going to take you that long, but just, consecutively with the meetings that you might have to go through that, we're talking about no more than, 3 to 5 hours max over a period of maybe a week to get it right, where you have to make sure that time that you spend interviewing and hiring is worth it. So,
well said. All right. Good topic. Good discussion. Thanks, team.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks.